John Mark, mentioned in Colossians 4, verse 10, was a man who had a very different career in the ministry than either Tychicus or Aristarchus. He was a travel companion of Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey. He deserted them when the going got tough. Acts 13, verse 13 reads, Now Paul and his companions put out to sea from Paphos and came to Perga in Pamphylia, and John left them and returned to Jerusalem. Mark's desertion was later to become a source of friction between Paul and Barnabas. Barnabas wanted to take Mark along the second missionary journey, but Paul, not trusting Mark to be loyal, refused. That led to such a sharp disagreement between Paul and Barnabas that they separated from each other. Acts 15:37 to 39 reads, And Barnabas was desirous of taking John, called Mark, along with them also, but Paul kept insisting they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had gone with them to do the work. And there arose such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another, and Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. From Colossians 4, verse 10, we understand that Mark was a cousin of Barnabas, and this gives us a good explanation of why Barnabas might have been willing to overlook and forgive his error. Mark was his own family, and hence Barnabas was making allowances for a momentary weakness because of what he knew about him. Fortunately, the story does not end with Paul and Mark at odds. By the time Paul wrote Colossians, Mark had become a changed man. He had been restored to usefulness, probably through the ministry of Peter, who himself was no stranger to failure. In Philemon 24, Paul names him among his fellow workers. The man whom Paul once rejected became one of his greatest helpers. 2 Timothy 4 verse 11 reads, Only Luke is with me. Pick up Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for service. Paul told the Colossians that if Mark came to them, they were to obey his instructions and welcome him. The church most likely knew of the past unfaithfulness of Mark and needed this recommendation of him. They were not to shun him because of his previous failure. Mark later received a privilege shared by only three other men in history, writing one of the Gospels. Paul is not only reconciled to him himself, but recommends him to the respect of the churches, thus giving us a great example of a truly Christian forgiving spirit. If men have been guilty of a fault, it must not be always remembered against them. We must forget as well as forgive. Galatians 6 verse 1 reads, Brethren, even if a man is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such as one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, lest you too be tempted. John Mark is an encouragement to every one of us who have failed in our attempt to serve God. He didn't sit around, sulk, and complain. He got back to the ministry and proved himself faithful to the Lord and to Apostle Paul. Are you willing to be transformed like John Mark and to forgive like Paul for the gospel's sake? Be blessed.